The crystalline spires of New Carthage stretched toward the purple sky, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 moons. But Talia saw none of this beauty from the depths of the processing center, where she and dozens of other slaves awaited their fate. Her silver-tinted skin, once a mark of pride among her people, the Lysarians, was now dulled by years of captivity under the Carthul Empire. The processing center buzzed with activity as slave traders showcased their merchandise to potential buyers. Talia's hands, bound by energy cuffs, trembled slightly as she remembered her former life as a healer, using her species' natural empathic abilities to ease suffering. Now, those same abilities made her valuable property. Lysarians were prized for their capacity to sense emotions and heal through touch. Hidden among the crowd, Nathan Foster maintained his careful composure. To all observers, he appeared to be just another wealthy merchant, his dark blue suit matching the latest fashion of the Empire's elite. But beneath this facade lay a different truth. His presence on New Carthage was part of a larger plan, one that had taken years to put into motion. The auction began, and Talia felt the familiar wave of despair wash over her. She had been through this before, sold from one master to another, each promising worse treatment than the last. But something felt different today. Through her dampened empathic abilities, she sensed an unusual presence in the crowd. Someone whose emotions didn't match the cold calculation or cruel excitement of typical buyers. Nathan moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his eyes carefully assessing each situation. He had spent months establishing his cover identity, building a reputation as a successful but unremarkable merchant. Every step had been calculated, every interaction carefully planned. But nothing had prepared him for the sight of Talia. When their eyes met across the auction floor, he felt a jolt of recognition. Not because he knew her, but because he saw in her eyes the same fierce intelligence he had seen in countless others he had helped free. Despite years of oppression, her spirit remained unbroken. The bidding for Talia began, and Nathan played his part perfectly. He made his offers with just the right amount of interest, neither too eager nor too hesitant. The other bidders gradually dropped away, leaving him as the winner. The transaction was completed with the usual efficiency of the Empire's bureaucracy, and soon Talia found herself being led away by this mysterious human. As they walked through the streets of New Carthage, Talia studied her new owner carefully. His stride was confident but not arrogant, and he held her restraints loosely, almost carelessly. When they reached a quiet alley, he did something that shocked her. He stopped and turned to face her directly. "My name is Nathan Foster," he said quietly, his voice carrying an unexpected gentleness. "And I'm here to offer you a choice." Talia's eyes widened. In all her years of slavery, no one had ever offered her a choice about anything. She remained silent, waiting for the catch, the cruel joke that would surely follow. "The choice is simple," Nathan continued, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing a small device. "I can deactivate your restraints right now. You can run, hide, try to make your way off-world, I won't stop you. Or you can come with me, help me free others like yourself, and perhaps change things for good." Talia's voice, unused to speaking freely, came out as a whisper. "Why would you do this? Why would you risk everything to help slaves?" Nathan's expression softened, but his eyes remained intent. "Because where I come from, we believe that freedom isn't just a privilege, it's a fundamental right. And sometimes, someone has to take the first step toward making that right a reality." For a moment, Talia stood frozen, her mind racing with possibilities she hadn't dared consider in years. Then, slowly, she straightened her shoulders, lifting her chin with a dignity that years of slavery hadn't managed to crush. "If you're lying," she said, her voice growing stronger, "you should know that Lysarians can sense deception." Nathan smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "I'm counting on it." As the suns began to set over New Carthage, casting long shadows through the crystalline towers, Talia made her choice. She would trust this human, this Nathan Foster, not because she had no other options, but because for the first time in years, she could sense something she had almost forgotten existed: hope. Little did either of them know that this moment, this choice, would set in motion events that would shake the very foundations of the Carthul Empire. The story of a human diplomat and a Lacerian healer would become legend, but for now, they were simply two people standing in an alley, choosing to believe in the possibility of change. The safe house was nothing like what Talia had imagined. Nestled in the industrial district of New Carthage, it appeared to be an ordinary warehouse from the outside. But inside, Nathan had created something extraordinary, a sanctuary for those seeking freedom. 2 weeks had passed since the auction, and Talia was slowly adjusting to her new reality. The healing marks on her wrists where the restraints had been were fading, but the memories remained fresh. She stood by the window, watching the endless stream of cargo ships passing overhead, each one carrying goods manufactured by slave labor. "Your abilities," Nathan said, approaching quietly from behind, "they're returning?" Talia nodded, turning to face him. Without the suppression fields used by her former masters, her natural empathic abilities were growing stronger each day. "I can sense everyone in the building now," she replied. "The fear, the hope, the uncertainty, it's all there." Nathan had brought others here, 12 former slaves from different species, each with their own story of survival. But Talia knew there was more to his plan than simple rescue operations. She had noticed the encrypted communications, the late-night meetings, the carefully maintained records of Empire shipping routes and guard rotations. "You're building something bigger than a rescue operation," she said. It wasn't a question. Nathan's expression remained neutral, but she could sense his approval. "The Empire's strength lies in convincing everyone that resistance is impossible," he explained, pulling up a holographic display of New Carthage's sectors. "But systems built on fear and oppression have a fundamental weakness: they never expect their property to fight back." Talia studied the display, noting the patterns of security patrols, the locations of processing centers, the schedules of slave transports. Her medical training had taught her to see patterns, to understand how complex systems work together. "These aren't random rescue targets," she realized. "You're systematically dismantling their infrastructure." "With your help, we could do more," Nathan said quietly. "Your people's abilities, the healing, the empathy, they're not just skills. They're weapons the Empire never considered." The idea struck Talia like a physical blow. She had always used her abilities to heal, to comfort, to understand. But Nathan was right: knowledge of emotions could be used to predict behavior, to know when guards were suspicious or alert, to sense the perfect moment to act. That evening, as the other refugees gathered for their daily meal, Talia watched them with new eyes. There was Ren, a Kovarian engineer whose mathematical genius had been exploited to design slave ships. Markel, a Centaurian warrior who had been forced to train Empire troops. Each of them had skills that could be turned against their former oppressors. Nathan joined them, sitting beside Talia with a bowl of synthetic protein. She had noticed he always ate the same food as the refugees, never taking advantage of his position to enjoy better meals. It was one of many small things that had convinced her of his sincerity. "Tell me about Earth," she said suddenly. The others fell silent, eager to hear about the mysterious human homeworld. Nathan's eyes grew distant. "Earth is complicated. We've made countless mistakes, fought terrible wars, faced our own demons of prejudice and cruelty. But we learned, we grew, we changed. When we reached the stars and found slavery still existed out here, we couldn't just stand by and watch. But officially, Earth maintains diplomatic relations with the Empire," Talia pointed out. Nathan's smile held no humor. "Officially, yes. Unofficially, well, let's just say I'm not the only human working to change things." Later that night, as most of the others slept, Talia found Nathan in the communication room, reviewing reports from other cells of the Resistance. She had made her decision. "I want to help train the others," she said. "My abilities, I can teach them to use their own unique skills in ways the Empire won't expect. But I have one condition. Nathan looked up, waiting. No more auctions, she said firmly. No more pretending to buy slaves. We find another way to get them out. It won't be easy, Nathan warned. The auction system is the safest way to dash. It's not about safety, Talia interrupted. It's about dignity. Every time you participate in an auction, you validate their system. We need to show people there's another way. Nathan studied her for a long moment, and Talia felt his emotions shift from concern to admiration. You're right, he said finally. We'll find another way. The next morning, Talia began working with the others, teaching them to harness their unique abilities in new ways. Ren's understanding of ship designs became a tool for planning escapes. Markel's combat training was adapted into a system for teaching others to defend themselves without weapons. But more importantly, they began to share their stories, their hopes, their dreams of freedom. The safe house became more than just a hiding place, it became a crucible where former slaves transformed into resistance fighters. As Talia watched her first group of students practice their new skills, she felt Nathan's presence behind her. The Empire won't know what hit them, he said softly. No, Talia agreed, a fierce smile playing at her lips. They won't. Because they never bothered to look past what we could do for them to see who we really are. The revolution was beginning, not with grand battles or dramatic speeches, but with quiet moments of transformation, as those who had been treated as property reclaimed their power, one skill, one lesson, one person at a time. The explosion rocked the night sky of New Carthage, sending cascades of sparks through the industrial sector. Talia watched from the rooftop of their safe house as the Empire's largest processing center burned, its security systems offline thanks to Ren's precise calculations. No slaves had been inside, they'd been evacuated hours before through underground tunnels that Markel's team had spent weeks preparing. Beautiful sight, isn't it? Nathan's voice carried a mix of satisfaction and concern as he joined her at the edge of the roof. The past 3 months had changed him, gone was the careful disguise of a merchant, replaced by the bearing of a resistance leader. Talia nodded, her silver skin reflecting the distant flames. The Empire will respond harshly, she said, not taking her eyes off the burning facility. They'll increase security, conduct raids, make examples of anyone they suspect. That's exactly what we want, Nathan replied, pulling up a holographic map of the city. Dozens of points glowed softly, marking the locations of other safe houses they'd established. The harder they crack down, the more people will see their true nature. Every act of cruelty creates new allies for us. The resistance had grown beyond anything Talia had imagined possible. What had started with 12 refugees in a warehouse had expanded into a network of hundreds. Former slaves used their intimate knowledge of Empire facilities to plan operations. Sympathetic merchants diverted supplies. Even some lower-ranking Empire officials, disgusted by the system they served, had begun passing information. But their greatest weapon had proven to be something the Empire had never considered a threat: communication. The stories of successful escapes, of slaves becoming leaders, of dignity reclaimed, spread through underground channels. Each tale of freedom inspired others to dream, to hope, to act. Talia's own role had evolved. Her empathic abilities, combined with her medical knowledge, made her uniquely suited for evaluating potential allies and caring for the wounded. She could sense deception, fear, courage, and determination, crucial skills for a movement that relied on trust and secrecy. We've received word from the outer colonies, Nathan said, his voice dropping lower. Similar movements are starting there. The Empire's grip is weakening. Before Talia could respond, she felt a spike of fear from below. One of their sentries was alarmed. Moments later, Markel burst through the roof access door. Empire patrols, he growled, his warriors' instincts on high alert. 3 squads, moving in formation. This isn't a random sweep. Nathan's expression hardened. How long? 10 minutes, maybe less. Talia was already moving. Her mind reached out, touching the emotions of everyone in the safe house. Fear, determination, readiness, they had drilled for this. Everyone's initiating evacuation protocols, she reported. The tunnels are clear. But Nathan wasn't moving toward the escape route. Instead, he was accessing the building's security systems. You two go with the others. I'll stay behind, wipe the systems, make sure there's no trace. No. Talia's voice carried an authority that surprised even her. We don't sacrifice anyone. Not anymore. She turned to Markel. Get everyone into the tunnels. Nathan and I will handle the data. The next few minutes passed in a blur of controlled chaos. As refugees and resistance fighters moved swiftly through the escape tunnels, Talia and Nathan worked in perfect synchronization. Her empathic abilities monitored the approaching patrols while his fingers flew over the control panels, erasing records and planting false data. They're searching the adjacent buildings, Talia reported, her silver skin pale in the dim light. 2 minutes at most. Nathan finished his work and turned to her. In that moment, something passed between them, an understanding deeper than words. They had both changed, grown stronger together, found something neither had expected in this battle for freedom. Ready? He asked, holding out his hand. Talia took it without hesitation. Always. They made it to the tunnels just as the first patrol breached the building's outer defenses. As they moved through the darkness, guided by luminescent markers, Talia felt the emotions of their pursuers fade into the distance. The safe house would be lost, but their people, their family, were safe. Hours later, in a backup facility across the city, the resistance regrouped. What could have been a devastating blow had become a demonstration of their strength and preparation. As Talia moved among the refugees, offering healing and comfort where needed, she overheard snippets of conversation. Instead of fear, she sensed determination. Instead of despair, resolve. Nathan found her as she finished treating a young Kovarian's minor injuries. The Empire will claim this as a victory, he said quietly. They'll say they drove us out, proved we're weak. Talia smiled, a fierce expression that would have shocked her former masters. Let them. They still don't understand. Every time they think they've beaten us, we emerge stronger. Because we're not fighting for power or wealth, we're fighting for each other. As if to emphasize her words, a cheer went up from the gathered refugees. Markel had arrived with news. 3 more safe houses had successfully evacuated their people, and in the confusion of the raids, another processing center had been quietly liberated. The Empire had meant to crush them. Instead, they had only proved what Talia and Nathan had known all along, that the strongest chains were those of fear, and once broken, they could never be reforged. The underground medical bay hummed with quiet activity as Talia worked tirelessly to heal the wounded from their latest operation. Her silver hands glowed softly as she channeled her healing energy into a young Centaurian fighter, mending his broken ribs. The Resistance's new base, hidden within the abandoned mining tunnels beneath New Carthage's industrial district, had become a sanctuary for hundreds. Nathan watched from the doorway, his heart heavy with both pride and concern. The past week had been their most successful yet, and their most costly. 3 major slave transport ships had been intercepted, freeing over 1,000 captives. But the Empire's response had been swift and brutal. You should rest, he said softly, approaching Talia as she finished with her patient. You've been healing others for 16 hours straight. Talia straightened, swaying slightly with exhaustion. There are still more who need help. And they'll get it, Nathan interrupted gently, catching her arm as she stumbled. But you can't help anyone if you collapse. She allowed him to guide her away from the medical bay, through the winding tunnels that had become their new home. The resistance had transformed these abandoned mines into a functioning base, complete with living quarters, command centers, and training facilities. The Empire would never think to look for them here. Slaves weren't supposed to be capable of such organization. They reached Talia's quarters, a small but comfortable room carved from the rock. Nathan had insisted that all their people have private spaces, places to retreat and remember they were individuals, not just soldiers in a cause. As the door closed behind them, Talia finally let her composure slip, her shoulders sagging with exhaustion. The Empire executed 50 citizens in the central square today, she said quietly, sitting on the edge of her bed. Public examples of what happens to those who help slaves escape. Nathan's jaw tightened. I know. But their brutality is backfiring. Every public execution, every crackdown, turns more people against them. Even their own citizens are beginning to question the system. That doesn't make it easier to bear. Talia's voice cracked slightly. I can feel their pain, Nathan. Not just the physical pain, but the fear, the grief, the anger. Sometimes it's overwhelming. Without thinking, Nathan sat beside her, taking her hand. Her silver skin seemed to shimmer in the dim light, and he felt the subtle resonance of her empathic abilities responding to his presence. They had grown closer over the months, their partnership deepening into something neither had expected or planned for. Tell me about Earth again, she whispered, leaning against his shoulder. Tell me about a world where people are free. Nathan smiled softly, remembering his home. Earth isn't perfect, we've had our own struggles with darkness and cruelty. But we learned, grew, evolved. When we reached the stars and found societies still practicing slavery, we couldn't stand idle. That's why there are others like me, working throughout the Empire, helping movements like ours. How many? Enough to make a difference. The Empire doesn't understand humans, they think we're primitive because we're new to interstellar travel. They don't realize that our greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons, but our ability to connect, to empathize, to fight for what's right even when it's dangerous. Talia was quiet for a moment, her hand still in his. When I first met you at the auction, I sensed something different about you. Not just kindness or compassion, but a fire, a determination I'd never felt before. It gave me hope when I'd forgotten what hope felt like. Nathan turned to face her, struck by the intensity in her iridescent eyes. You gave me hope too, he admitted. When I saw your strength, your resilience despite everything you'd endured, I knew we could succeed. The Empire sees slaves as property, but they don't understand that oppression breeds strength, that suffering creates bonds stronger than any chains. Their faces were close now, the air between them charged with unspoken emotions. Talia's empathic abilities picked up every nuance of Nathan's feelings, his admiration, his concern, his growing affection. Her own heart raced with feelings she had thought lost to years of slavery. The moment was interrupted by an urgent knock at the door. Markel's voice carried through the metal. Nathan, Talia, we've received critical intelligence. The Empire is planning something big. They pulled apart, professionalism instantly replacing vulnerability. Nathan stood first, offering Talia his hand. As she took it, their eyes met with shared understanding, whatever they felt for each other would have to wait. The cause came first. In the command center, they found their core team gathered around the holographic display. Ren's fingers flew over the controls, bringing up intercepted communications and security footage. The news was worse than they'd feared. They're bringing in the suppression fleet, Markel growled, his warrior's instincts bristling. 6 capital ships, dozens of support vessels. They mean to make an example of New Carthage. Talia felt the spike of fear ripple through the assembled leaders. The suppression fleet was legendary for its brutality in crushing slave rebellions. Entire worlds had been devastated by their attacks. But when she looked at Nathan, she saw not fear but determination. He studied the tactical displays with intense focus, his mind already working on solutions. This was why she had come to love him, his unwavering courage, his refusal to accept defeat. "Then we'll give them an example they'll never forget," Nathan said, his voice carrying through the command center. "The Empire thinks they're hunting rebels, but they're about to learn they're facing something much more dangerous, people fighting for their freedom, their dignity, and their right to love." As their team began planning their response to this new threat, Talia and Nathan shared a brief glance. Whatever came next, they would face it together, not just as leaders of a resistance, but as two souls who had found something precious amid the chaos of rebellion. The massive ships of the Suppression Fleet hung in New Carthage's sky like dark stars, their weapon systems casting ominous shadows over the city. From the Resistance's hidden command center deep underground, Talia watched the tactical displays with growing concern. 6 days had passed since the fleet's arrival, and the Empire's message was clear: surrender or face annihilation. "Their ground forces are moving into position," Wren reported, his engineers' precision evident in the detailed holographic overlays. "They're establishing containment zones in every sector. Anyone suspected of helping slaves will be arrested, or worse." Nathan stood at the center of the command room, his presence a beacon of calm amid the crisis. "Then it's time," he said, looking at each member of his core team. "Initiate Operation Daybreak." The plan they had developed was audacious, perhaps impossible. But as Talia had learned, impossible was what humans did best. Over the past week, while the Empire had focused on military preparations, the Resistance had been laying the groundwork for something unprecedented. "All teams report ready," Markel announced, his warrior's pride evident in his stance. "The network is in place." Talia stepped forward, her silver skin gleaming under the emergency lights. "The medical teams are prepared. Every safe house has been equipped with emergency supplies, and our evacuation routes are secured." Nathan nodded, then activated the communication system that would broadcast to every Resistance cell in the city. "This is not just a fight for freedom," he began, his voice carrying to thousands of hidden listeners. "This is a fight for our future, for our right to live as equals, to love, to dream, to build something better than the Empire ever imagined possible." As he spoke, the first phase of their plan began. Throughout New Carthage, seemingly loyal Empire citizens, merchants, bureaucrats, even some military personnel, began their carefully choreographed roles. Security systems failed. Communication networks experienced mysterious outages. Supply chains broke down. But the true power of their plan lay not in sabotage but in unity. As Empire forces moved to arrest suspected Resistance sympathizers, they found entire neighborhoods standing together, refusing to surrender their neighbors. Workers in crucial facilities simply stopped working. The complex machinery of oppression ground to a halt in the face of passive resistance. "The Suppression Fleet is powering up their main weapons," Wren warned, his fingers flying over the controls. "They're preparing to make an example of the industrial district." "Perfect," Nathan smiled grimly. "Transmit the signal." Across the city, hidden transmitters activated, broadcasting a message that cut through all Empire communications. It wasn't a declaration of war or a demand for surrender. Instead, it was stories, thousands of them, from slaves and citizens alike, telling of their experiences under Empire rule. The broadcast carried the thoughts and emotions of every being who had suffered under their oppression, amplified by the combined power of dozens of Lacerian empaths led by Talia. The effect was devastating. Empire troops, confronted with the full emotional weight of their actions, began to hesitate. Ship crews, many of whom had never questioned their orders, found themselves overwhelmed by the truth of what they had been part of. "The first destroyer is standing down," Markel reported incredulously. "Their crew is refusing orders to fire." One by one, ships of the Suppression Fleet faced mutinies as their crews turned against their commanders. On the ground, Empire forces found themselves surrounded not by armed rebels, but by masses of citizens and slaves standing together, demanding change. In the command center, Nathan turned to Talia. "Your people's greatest gift wasn't healing," he said softly. "It was the ability to make others feel the truth." Talia's eyes shone with tears of joy and exhaustion. "And humanity's greatest gift was showing us that change is possible, that hope is stronger than fear." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. As the suppression fleet's command structure crumbled, the resistance emerged from hiding, not as conquerors, but as leaders ready to build something new. Nathan and Talia worked tirelessly, coordinating with newly freed ships' crews, organizing emergency services, ensuring that no retribution was taken against former oppressors. As the first sun of New Carthage rose the next day, it illuminated a changed city. The spires still reached toward the purple sky, but now they belonged to everyone. Former slaves and citizens worked together to establish a new government, one based on equality and justice. In a quiet moment amid the chaos of reconstruction, Talia found Nathan standing on a balcony overlooking the city. She could sense his exhaustion, but also his profound satisfaction and hope. "What happens now?" she asked, joining him at the railing. Nathan smiled, taking her hand. "Now the real work begins. Building something new is harder than tearing down the old. But Earth will help. There are already ships on the way with supplies, medical aid, and diplomatic support." "And us?" Talia's voice was soft, but her meaning clear. Nathan turned to face her fully, his eyes reflecting the dawn light. "I was sent here to help free slaves," he said. "I never expected to find freedom myself, freedom to love, to dream, to build a future with someone who understands both the price of freedom and its value." Talia stepped closer, her silver skin luminescent in the morning light. "The Empire thought they could own us, control us, break us," she whispered. "They never understood that the strongest bonds aren't built on fear or power, but on love and choice." As they kissed, the sun rose fully over New Carthage, its light catching the falling remnants of orbital chains, the last physical symbols of an empire that had crumbled not before weapons or armies, but before the combined power of human determination and the indomitable spirit of those who had dared to dream of freedom. In the years that followed, the story of New Carthage would be told throughout the galaxy, not just as a tale of rebellion, but as proof that change was possible, that love could flourish in the darkest places, and that the human spirit, combined with the strength of those they fought to free, could reshape the stars themselves.